Hello, welcome to the Bazaar MTG Podcast. This is the first episode. It's named after my Discord server called the Bazaar, and after the iconic card Bazaar of Baghdad. So hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. I don't know if it's Bazaar or Bizarre. But anyways, today we're going to be talking with Chris, who I found on Twitter, and he is creating these graphs. That's kind of what grabbed my attention, is these graphs that are graphs that I've never seen before. So I've seen a lot of Magic Finance interfaces, and I said, hey, what's that graph? What is this thing, this green graph? And what it does is it predicts demand or different correlations with buy list. And so we'll break that down today. And so how are you doing, Chris?
I'm doing all right. How about you? Thanks again for having me on, by the way.
Yeah, no problem, man. Did I describe what these things do? Because let's describe exactly what are you showing us when you tweet. I found you when I was just looking at the Magic Finance hashtag,
Yeah.
and I saw your post in there, and the post, a lot of times there's a lot of noise in that hashtag, and when I saw your post, I said, hey, there's something to this. This guy knows what's up. So tell me about this stuff you've been posting.
I appreciate it. Trying to get out there. So, what these graphs do, or at least the ones that I'm trying to show off a little bit, just right up from the start, I'll just be up front. All of the buy list graphs that I show on Twitter, they're all Card Kingdom, because I feel like that's the buy list that everybody knows and goes to. So really, I just realized poking around all these Magic websites, everybody was tracking market price. And I realized once I stopped playing a few years back and I was selling off my cards, that the market price wasn't very useful for me as a small-time seller trying to get rid of my cards. The only thing that was reliable was the buy list, and it didn't look like.
Now let's before we jump in, let's talk about that a little bit, because I know it's like super emotional to sell your collection. For some, maybe not for you, but for many people, right? You have these ideas of what your cards are worth. And how did that process go, finding out that, hey, the market price is not? Did you first try to post on Facebook or something like that? Or tell me a little bit about that.
So I was really fortunate. I had a really good store owner. I started playing in Omaha, and he treated us really, really fairly. He really brought me and my friend group at the time into the game of Magic. Really hats off to him. So getting a fair price for my cards, and in my instance, I understand it's not for everybody, wasn't that bad. He would offer 15% on buy list, so he was still getting it under market, and he knew us. We showed up. At the time we were making trades over the counter with our dorm laundry money, trying to get our F&M decks. So I was dealt very fairly in that regard. But it definitely hurt the first time I had to get rid of most of my collection. It was a little emotional, but helped me get into the swing of things, helped me make a couple mistakes, and you got to learn the hard way sometimes in the finance element, and it really helped on the learning curve.
So you learned the finance element by going through this sell-off. You just kind of like, whoa, wait a second, there's a learning curve here, there's an adjustment. I should more be looking at buy lists than the market price, right?
Yes.
And then how did that get into this graph making stuff? How did that go from? Because I would imagine, hey, you're selling your collection off. Who cares, right? That there's a difference between market and buy list. You figured it out. Now let's get out of here. Let's get the money and run. Right?
I wish it was. That sounds great. I wish it was that easy. There was actually 2 years in between there. It was basically grad school for me. So when I sold off my collection, I was just a regular player. I didn't really think twice about it. I was just like, I need money right now. I've got $2,000 in an EDH deck. That's kind of ridiculous as I thought about it in hindsight, and I need this cash now. So I just got out, and that was the summer right before all the reserve list spiked. So I had some real feel bad there.
Seller's remorse, so to speak.
Yeah,
right?
Yes. That's hard, yeah. But after I did that, I started watching the market, because I felt I had the buyer's remorse. So I just started watching the graphs and the trends, and I was trying to. I had it in me, because I went to grad school for data analysis. I had it in me that I wanted to predict the future price of Magic cards, and basically I just realized that it was far I won't say easier, but I found far more success watching and tracking buy list offers than I did market prices, just because they fluctuate. Well, one of a few reasons, but they fluctuate far less drastically. They don't really react to buyouts. So, it's the slow and steady grind versus the hitting it big with the big percentages that everyone loves to see.
So, like, what you're saying is that the market price is more fickle to the emotions or the leanings of the community, and the buy list price is more steady.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
and so, like, what you could see was that you might be able to predict the price of a card. Like, you could predict the buy list price, but could you actually predict the price of the card?
So this.
Yeah, tell
Yes,
me about this, because this is where I'm scratching my head, and I'm not challenging you. You know what I mean? I'm not saying
no,
you
I
can't do
totally.
it. I'm just curious. Like, what does that mean? Can you really predict prices? Because if you could, like, that kind of means you should be rich, right?
Yeah, I wish. So this is something that I could go. I honestly could probably write a tiny book about, for better or for worse, at this point. And that I feel like the Magic community puts far too much stock in what a market value is for their cards. Mainly because there's 12 different sites. I mean, you've got MTG Goldfish, you got MTG Stocks, you've got CardSphere now, you've got TCG's got 3 versions of it. Magic Card Market over in Europe's got 9 different pricings if you try and access their API. So the market price that nobody can agree on, but everybody wants to price their cards by. I just wanted to find something constant. What is a price that everyone goes to, that everyone can rely on, and everyone does rely on? And that was buy list prices, whether it's ABU, whether it's Card Kingdom, Channel Fireball. Those are, I mean, there's far fewer of those vendors with offers out on cards than there are different market definitions of what a card is worth.
I see. So you're saying there's fewer vendors, so it's easier to see the data than there are, like.
Yes.
Okay, that's interesting though, because a vendor that sells is a vendor that has a buy list, though, right?
Yes. Sorry, I gotta ramble on here. But basically, because there's so few vendors, it made it a lot easier for me to hone in and try and predict the values that they would be offering. Not necessarily the market price, but if I can find cards below market price and that are also below buy list price that I know are trending up, I mean, that's, somebody asked for a question. I mean, that's all I'm about is risk aversion right there. So even if the card doesn't move and the buy list moves down to what I bought in for, I mean, I was in and out for zero. My cost was my time doing it, but more often than not, I'll make 20-30% over a course of 7 days, ship it back to them, and Bob's your uncle.
Bob's your uncle. My wife says that sometimes. So what you're saying is that, so you try to buy in closer to buy list, because then when you sell by buy list, it's like you kind of just ignore the market price.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct? And so, like, you say, hey, this card is really close to what a buy list is. I'm going to buy a bunch of copies of this because of the market trend that I'm seeing. It's trending upward. I'm going to buy some now, and then as it matures, I'm going to jump out and send them to buy list, because, like, you're not watching the market price. You're watching the actual buy list trend up, right?
I'm watching both, to be honest with you, but I am definitely putting a much, much higher emphasis on the buy list. Because for me, from the graphs that I've shared, you can see I'm tracking demand, how it's selling, how it's moving on the market. I'm tracking the number of listings on TCG, how many cards. Is Card Kingdom offering their full 8? Is ABU offering 8? Are they offering less? If they're offering less, usually that means they don't have inventory. So that means you can really get a good gauge for how much is out there on the market. So
what does this what does this look like? Because, like, I feel like, okay, there's people listening right now, and what they're thinking is, like, we're going pretty deep in the Magic finance side of things. Now, if it was just a player, like, let's just pretend there's just a player out there, someone who plays VDH, what you're doing, is there any money to be made? Now, I kind of know the answer to this because of a comment that you made, but is there money to be made? Was that comment that you made just kind of like offhand, or is it a real deal? Like, can you make money doing buying based on these graphs and then selling after you've predicted that they're going to go up?
Yes, you absolutely can.
Okay, now you said, and I don't know if this is true, you said that you pay your rent in Queens with money made by doing this. And that's rent in Queens is not cheap, right?
Yeah, it's about $2,200.
And you're able to pay your rent $2,200 a month by doing this, right?
Especially this latter half of the year once I got these graphs going.
Yeah, once you got it all up and running. Now here's the question: what does that mean? Like, okay, so let's run us through like what it might look like for you to do this. What do you do? You got these graphs going. I picture you with like, 15 different monitors, spread out, a bunch of different things, real-time data coming. Okay, so you got your command center. What happens? How do you make money? How does the money come? What happens?
You have a much cooler image of me. I wish it was that.
You're supposed to just go with it, man, and say, yeah, okay. So when I'm looking at my monitors.
All right, so I'm looking at my graphs. The first thing that I like to see is, the first rule of thumb that I have is that pricing data outside of the last set release is irrelevant to me. Any buy list offers before the last big increase of cards came in is irrelevant. So that makes it really easy for me to have nice travel-sized graphs, 90 days only. I can throw it in a Google Sheet. It doesn't bother. I don't need SQL. I don't need any of that hardcore techie, or not hardcore, but more tech-oriented stuff. I can use simple spreadsheets.
Do you cut that data out yourself? Like, do you just say, okay, I'm going to drop it because the new set has come out?
I mean, I hold on to it because I feel getting rid of data just hurts me internally at just on a nerd level.
It's good data. Don't get rid of it.
But I don't really factor it into my decision making, just because too many things change when you introduce 360 new cards into the realm of Magic. All of a sudden, cards that didn't have value have value. Other things no longer in the spotlight, they fall off. So, just trying to stay kind of in the spotlight where all of the demand is. I can't really rely on numbers more than 90 days back. I can, but I don't put much of any stock into them.
Okay, now let's say, like, how do you know what's investable? Like, because, okay, if you look at a graph for a certain card, yeah, you can see, oh, this is trending upward. Let's say the data's fresh, you're looking at it, it's a good buy, you're going to buy in, or whatever you do, you're going to explain that. But, like, there's tons of cards. So do you have, like, graphs for every card, or is there, like, a performer? Like, do you have a different graph that says, here's the top 10 performers or something like that? How does that work?
So I have graphs for 45,000 cards.
Okay, so you have 45,000 graphs.
Mm-hmm.
Man, that should go in your Twitter bio. The man with 45,000 graphs.
I don't use all of them. If you start looking at bio, and this is an easy rule of thumb, I feel like a lot of even players know. I mean, mythics are more rare than rares, and rares are more rare than uncommons.
Right.
And buy lists have a high proclivity for offering more for mythics and rares. So obviously, that gives me a pretty easy way to subset my data right there. The other thing that I tend to avoid thoroughly and as much as possible are foils, because buy lists are really stringent on what they grade as near mint foils. So a lot of times what looks like a good deal on foils, after grading, you'll come out hopefully breaking even more often than not. So I like to avoid those. So generally, by the end of the day,
for people who are trying to pay the rent in Queens, they don't want to buy foils. But maybe Commander players, if they see a card that's like close to buy list foil, right? That's maybe a good buy for them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's just in terms of me, where I want high turnover, I want a lot of money constantly churning. I tend to avoid those. Foils are a fine play, and I could go into this all day. Foils often ride the back of the non-foil. So if a non-foil card is selling really well, there's a lot fewer of the foil versions. So not saying it's a bad play at all. It's just higher risk for me, and I like to avoid them when I can. Sometimes there's just such a good deal there, I got to take it.
I find too that if you're not doing flipping like large amounts of cards, if you pick up a foil at a good price, it's always an opportunity to trade it at market price. So like if you see, like, one thing that would be interesting to me is, when I was doing more trading, like if I had a GP coming up, I might buy a handful of foils that are really close to buy list, and then go and trade them at the GP for cards that are hot, like Brazen Borrower, or things that are not foils, that are just like, so you're doing like a conversion, right? You're getting something on the buy list, and then you're trading it for stuff at market. But you
just mentioned something. Sorry, I just want to point out really quick as a full disclaimer: I have never been to a GP. I have never been to any form of Magic gathering. Everything I do is from my keyboard.
Do you want to go? But just like, let's get off the topic for a minute. Do you want to go to a GP, or do they look fun to you, or are you just not interested?
I would like to. I move every 2 years, so it's just been really chaotic. I mean, I enjoy doing F&Ms when I get out to, but I mean, I've got a fiance.
Why do you move? Why do you move her to? Is it like well, you don't have to, obviously you don't have to talk about it if you don't want to, but are you wanted in different states, or, what's going on there?
Be a full disclaimer here. I'm 24, dude. If I was that wanted, I'd be thrilled. No, it was mainly school. I mean, my father was a physician who liked to flip houses in his spare time. So obviously, we were quite active. I went to a military boarding school for 7 years. So I bounced around all the time.
Oh, I see.
So just moving was just kind of a fact of life for me through undergrad. Then I went to master's halfway across the country, New York. Then I just moved 4 months ago in under 10 days for the new job that I got in Manhattan. So I'm just very used to getting up and moving, but I'm never really around one place long enough to really get settled and make plans to go to events like that. So I got to get good at what I've got.
All right. Yeah. Well, congrats on the new job. So that's pretty cool. And let's talk about this. Let's go back to the process. So how do you find this card that you want to invest in? You have the 45,000 graphs. You say, hey, rares and mythics, we could just pare the data down to that. So you have a bunch of rares and mythics. How do you know which ones? How do you pick the winners, so to speak? Do you just look at a bunch of graphs, or is there a card? Do you think, oh, this card might be good, and then you look at the graph and it confirms, or how does it happen?
So a lot of times what I'll do is the first graph I go to is the buy list price trending up. And I've got to be really careful about this, because sometimes it's going up just because vendors can't get the copies in, and some other whale out there, call them whales, people who have a lot of cards, or vendors, they're holding, trying to wait for that highest buy list, and then they send in 400 copies and they crash it. So I've got to be really careful about that. But that's usually the first thing that I look for. And again, I mentioned the time frame of the 90 days. I really only analyze the latest 30 days with a much higher emphasis on the last 7. So these graphs that I show on Twitter and on everything, they show a full price trend. I'm really only ever really going in depth on the last 30, 28 days.
So you're zooming in on a little piece of that.
Yes, because I want to see
the thing that you're showing on Twitter.
Yeah, I want to see what's been moving lately. And once I see that it's moving on one of my buy list graphs, is my usual go-to, then I look at what is it looking like on TCG? How many vendor listings are there? Has that been increasing or declining above or below the average number for the rarity? And I see it's declining. That tells me that supply is not meeting current demand. And I also see that the buy list, who are not very fickle to market fluctuations, if they're moving in tandem, they're also selling it well. So I'm seeing the subtle signs. So even if market price hasn't moved yet, but I see these two things under the water moving, I know to position myself there and try and pick up those cards for when, in my opinion, the market will inevitably move up. So also will the buy list and give me an out. So
you're seeing like a steady decline in vendors on TCG Player having the card, which indicates basically people are buying it, right? Because vendors are running out of stock. And then you're seeing this incline in buy list pricing. So you're saying, buy list is going up. Vendors are having a hard time keeping in stock. Maybe the price hasn't moved, but this is the kind of movement you get excited about. Yes, absolutely. There's other, obviously, auxiliary signs, but those are like the 3 big ones that tells me this is a card I really want to focus in on. Do you have data that shows you this TCG stuff? Or do you actually just go look at it and say, how's it looking? TCG is public domain. I have that data. Okay. I like the way you answered that. So you found a card. You like it. It's probably not a foil. What happens next?
Well, I can use the World Breaker example that I shared earlier.
Okay, World Breaker from Oath of the Gatewatch, right?
Yep. It's a mythic. It's seeing play, a lot of play, almost always as a 4 of in Pioneer. Pioneer is really new. All of the mythics really being played in Pioneer are in-print mythics, which means there's a lot of supply. I kind of want to avoid those because they're still in supply.
Mhm.
I see World Breaker is an older set, all relatively speaking for Pioneer. It's not in print. And I've been seeing for the last month and a half that World Breaker, has been
Oathbreaker,
declining.
great format.
It is. It really is. But
I
I've
do
seen
like
that
it. I do like it.
it's a fun one. But I've been seeing that World Breaker has been declining in vendor levels. I can see that both Card Kingdom and TCG have had that card on their bestseller list, moving consistently higher. People haven't really been picking up on it. And I see that the buy list offer has been hit. It's been fluctuating more than I would like, but because it's a mythic, that's the little bit of risk that I'm willing to swallow on this one.
I take it the fluctuation is probably from pockets being revealed by the demand, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because as those buy list price go up and the demand goes up, I can see like it just working in the business. I know, hey man, go in the back and dig, see if we have any World Breakers. Hey, let's go buy these ones out of this store that has them priced really low. It starts. There's a vacuuming effect, right?
Mm-hmm.
As this happens, and all those lower price copies get sucked up. And then you get to the point where you just don't have World Breakers and you need to buy them. So you up your buy list price.
You guys are the ones that sit.
Okay, so you see this happening now. What do? You're like, hey man, World Breaker's it's gonna happen. I see all this stuff happening. Well, do you buy some? Where do you buy them? How do you buy them?
So something that's crazy that blows my mind consistently is that vendors, I don't know why. I still don't get this. They don't look at each other's prices. They really don't. The number of times I've caught Channel Fireball selling below Card Kingdom's buy list price is truly astounding. I've even
Wow.
sent them messages saying, "Do you want my help in fixing this?" And they've never gotten back to me. So they're apparently okay with it. I mean, I guess for them, they're selling at a profit. They've got a set price. But something like World Breaker, Channel Fireball had about 20 copies listed. So I was like, I think it was for like $3. I was like, I'll take that gamble. So I'll pick those up and I'll just sit on my little pocket. I definitely do not have enough capital to move the market in any meaningful way. So I'm really just trying to kind of hitch my ride with the way the trends are going and hope it works out.
Right. So then you buy the 25 copies. Do you ship them to your house or do you have them shipped to Card Kingdom, or how does it happen? Does it matter or does it fluctuate? Like, tell me about that part of it.
So in this instance, this is the highest risk play that I make. And yes, I order it to my home.
Okay.
Normally on like the tweets that I send out every day, those are what I call immediate money. They're arbitrage. Basically, their current market price with taxes, fees, shipping all included is underneath what Card Kingdom is buying. So you can drop ship those, and I do that all the time.
Is that okay? Like, can you drop ship them?
I have a few.
Like, or do people get mad? Like, if you're buying from, I know. Let me put it this way. I know that buying from like TCG, they don't like it when you drop ship, right? Like, I've had no problem on Cool Stuff Inc. Like, Cool Stuff Inc. you can drop ship to wherever, and I've done that before. But like, I know TCG gets finicky, and I can imagine like if Card Kingdom gets a package from Channel, how do they know it's from you?
Because the way you submit a buy list order, it has a unique identifying number. And so you put that on your order in the attention line, and there you go. But there is, and this is a personal ethical rule of mine, some people might not be this courteous. If I see that there's a seller, and I actually make sure when I'm getting my data, I take this into account. I'm not looking at any seller on TCG who has fewer than 10,000 sales. Because if you're a business and you have 10,000 sales, you should control your inventory. And I'm honestly counting on them being mature enough as a business and as an owner to know that they're responsible for the pricing of their inventory. Obviously, I don't want to take advantage of somebody who's just starting out on TCG. They've got 300 sales. They're selling a copy. They're just trying to drum up sales. I don't want to be that guy. and I'm not going to
Uh-huh.
do that. But if you're like Moose Loot or your channel Fireball, and I mean, I've reached out to you, and you're responsible for how you price your inventory, and I'm going to assume that if you're listing it at this price, you're making money on it. If I can make money on it too, we both are coming out of that situation winning. If
Yeah,
anybody,
it's a win-win.
if anybody ever messaged me saying that they don't want me doing that, I would stop in an instant. It has not happened yet, so keep on carrying on.
So you would just maybe block the store on TCG and just continue about your business like normal.
Mm-hmm. I mean, again, if anybody
if
told me not to, I wouldn't do it.
Okay. So you ship this, it comes to your house, and then okay, so there's two kinds, right? There's something that you're seeing that's kind of like going to happen, predictive, right? And then there's this other kind where you say it's instant money. There's like an act that could be. Now, why do you tweet that? Like, why don't you try to do it yourself first? You know?
To be perfectly honest, I do set myself first, and that all of these opportunities I'm tweeting out, I am also doing myself. The thing that Card Kingdom has set out, and I could be very, very clever and create 17 different Card Kingdom accounts and send in 17 different orders. But to be honest, I'm doing well enough doing what I'm doing that once I send in the desired amount of copies that they want, they will not allow me to send in any more under my account.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So after that, I've already gotten my money out of it. It's still sitting there. Anybody else, you've got to do it before, in the next 12 hours before the update to the buy list comes, because now they've got my copies. But in the meantime, that's still sitting there for anybody to.
So you've maxed out on your available money you can get from this. Why not let other people take a shot? If Card Kingdom wants to update their buy list and say, "Oh, we don't want no more," then maybe the faucet gets turned off, and but maybe people get the opportunity, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's really cool. And how many of these transactions do you think you do like on the regular? Like, would you like in a given week? How many times do you do this? Would you say?
How many?
I'm trying to get a gauge for like how much work is involved for people who are thinking, "Hey, I want to make some money." How much time and effort? People love to make money for free, doing nothing, right? Sitting at their keyboard. How does this work? How much time do you put in?
I will tell you right now that if this is not something you love doing, it is not worth your time to do. I love data, and I am a junior data scientist. I was on an email with John Finkel, so I felt very accomplished. I was like the 38th person CC, but I love doing this stuff. So this is what I play with in my spare time at work or when I'm at home. So I probably put in easily 15, 20 hours a week extra, just kind of playing around, just seeing what I can do to make it go faster, what I can get a hold of. And it's honestly, it's definitely a passion of love. But if you're not ready for a grind, and the fact that my time definitely probably has a higher, not trying to sound condescending at all, just that my time probably has a higher value than the time I've invested in making all of this. I just think it's really, really, really cool. So
yeah, you're driven by the project itself. That's the thing that propels you. And I think that getting paid maybe is more just like, hey, look, the machine works.
Yes. Oh no, when I first got this going, I was so scared to start putting money into it to actually test to see if it would work. But once I got my feet wet and it started running, I was like, oh, this is quite nice.
Now this thing you're talking about, is it a web app or is it spreadsheets or what is it? What can we know? Or is it secret sauce? And it's okay if it's secret. Like we can't give all these. We can't give these people everything, not for free, right?
I mean, I get a hold of this data in the same way that Quiet Speculation does. I mean, I have TCG API access, which gives me basically backdoor viewing, so I don't crash their website into the price of the cards. And I get a lot of information that way, and I can get information quickly. It does take a little coding skill. I am much more of an analysis guy. I was very fortunate in opening up this project online to folks I've met in Discord subs such as this, that people far better at collecting data were just so excited when I showed them what I was doing. and they hopped on. Somebody volunteered for free to create a database for me online. I mean, I have a SQL database, but I had no idea how to do that.
So they created like a PHP or a MySQL database online.
Influx database, and then somebody else who's far better at JavaScript and coding took my script and made it 10 times faster. And then they got all this data, and I'll admit, at first I was a little scared when they jumped on board. I was like, oh, I'm a little outdated now. And they put it in front of me. They're like, we have no idea how to analyze or really read this. I mean, so I was like, oh, I still have a purpose. So that's another reason why I'm still pretty open about sharing this, is that the vast majority, besides a couple of special individuals, really just they think it's cool too. And if they want to help out and jump right in, I'm all for it. I'm all for learning and speeding up processes, and it's so cool.
Wow, I love that attitude. I think it's great. Now, switching off from this thing, I think it's fascinating, and I don't want to go too deep in the weeds for that for a couple of reasons. Number one, maybe not everyone's here for that, but number two, like, this is a work in progress, so we don't know what will happen to it next. And like you said, other people are helping work on this. And now, are there like any aspirations to make this like a service, or what's your, so you put this stuff out on Twitter, right? And I'm just thinking there has to be some kind of driving force behind that, right? You have to be able to, you have to want to do something with it. Like, are you like teasing people for, hey, this is going to come soon, you can buy it? Are you like, hey, look at this cool thing I did? Or, are you wanting to be known? Like, hey, I want to be I want to have, thousands of Twitter followers and be known as a, MTG finance guru, or what is it? What's the drive there?
So, I mean, I'm a 24-year-old dude. To say my ego is not a part of it entirely would be lying. It's something, and I want to be known for that. I like being in the conversations for it. Like being in conversations with Charlie in your Discord. These are folks that have years of experience way above me, and somehow I get to be in the conversation. I thoroughly enjoy that.
Awesome.
Again, it's got to be a passion project to love. Then the honest answer is, this is the cool thing that I did. And it's cool to me to see interest in it, because that motivates me further, because there are definitely courses that I could take on my own time to make this a service. I mean, I definitely know some people that could help me, but I enjoy doing it. I like being in control of as much of it as I can be, because I started it. I like being a part of it. So if I can learn more along the way to make it into a website and to make it into a service that people could come to and check out, that would be awesome. Because again, I just feel like this market is 20 years behind, and there's just so many avenues for people to help out and get it up to date that I'm not worried in the slightest.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, there's a lot of when you have the power of coding and data analysis, right? I've been doing the magic finance thing for a while, and one of the things is that I depend on things like instinct and experience to understand pricing trends. You know what I mean? And what I love data, but I can't code things, so I can't like write code to go and analyze data. I can look at things and say, this looks a lot like what happened with this card, or I noticed this, or I know that this interaction is coming up.
Can I stop you just real quick? What you're doing right there is pattern recognition.
Okay.
People with experience who
pattern recognition.
You guys, folks like yourself, you guys have been in the market. You know examples of it. What is the similarity between all of those examples? That's the first thing I start asking people, such as yourself. What is the pattern? What makes them similar? Because now, what is the general trend you're looking for? General trends are quite, if you have a bit of coding knowledge, are the first things that you can find when analyzing data. So if you tell me what it is, even if it's just the curvature of the graph, or what bit of text on it reminds you of something else, I can then start honing in on what makes these cards move, and start really narrowing down on that pattern that's causing a card to consistently go up with that text, with that color, and really get into the thick of it. But that to me is really fun. I appreciate that you mentioned it. Sorry.
I think, no, please interrupt if I'm talking. I appreciate that. I think one of the things that would be interesting for me, because like this is something by instinct we know, if there's a card that has not gotten a lot of attention, and then all of a sudden gets a lot of attention, those are the kind of cards that have those more severe spikes, right? A card like Pithing Needle, which has always just been good, you know, it's going to have a gradual increase, you know. It's going to go up over time because we know that's a good card. It doesn't have to prove itself. But a card that just all of a sudden, this happens a lot when a new card gets released and it now interacts really favorably with a card that never did anything. Okay? Like a good example of this is the Possibility Storm card, right? This card, it works with some cards, but it never worked like it does with adventure sorceries, right? Being able to play an adventure sorcery for 1 mana that also can be in your deck and be a creature, and you know, like Love Struck Beast is a good example. That's just a good card on rate, but then now it kind of combos with Possibility Storm. So like when you're talking about analyzing these patterns and stuff like that, one thing that, you know, if I had coding knowledge and understood, what I would try to do is say, okay, let's analyze deck data and then find the cards that are like, you know, not popular but have become popular, you know what I mean, or are starting to show up, and like you start to see them first in like cards that like start to see play. Sometimes you start to see them in sideboards and then into main decks, and then, you know, as the meta shifts and stuff like that. So that's the kind of stuff that'd be interesting to analyze, in my opinion.
No, see, when you just explained also why I cut off at 90 days.
Why is that?
Because Possibility Storm, before Throne of Eldraine came out, nobody would have given it a second look. And this is also why the ground that I'm kind of trying to hit with my graphs here, what you described with Pithing Needle is something that DJ Johnson over on Brainstorm Brewery and Jason Alt and Corbin Hostler are fantastic. They are really good. I mean, DJ called in December. He said pick up a ton of Eldrazi conscriptions from UMA. And lo and behold, with the spoiler we got, Eldrazi conscriptions are selling quite briskly, and they're doing quite well because he recognized that would be a slow grower. He knew that was a casual card that people would slowly increase over time, and it was a good call on his part. It was right. I don't have the capital. I don't have the money of a vendor or a store to have that kind of inventory laying around. So I have to wait for the market to already show movement and kind of cross my fingers and hope nobody notices until it pops.
Right. Yeah, I think it's a good point that you make, and shout out to those guys too. They are some of the best, you know, and they're all great. I think they're, you know, I don't have enough good things to say about those guys and their abilities, you know. So that's really cool. And shout out to Brainstorm Brewery, you know, it's a good podcast. So we have some questions in our chat for you. Let's see if we can tackle some of those. I think we, you know, covered the show notes. So we had some specific questions. This one comes from Chris Martin. Would love to hear a bit about how you developed and automate the graphs that you share. We talked a little bit about that. Let's see. Maybe you can shed more light. And then he also goes, also, are you primarily focused on buyless arbitrage? I always say that word wrong. If so, can you walk through? We already did that. So is there any more that you can add to Chris's questions here?
I will say, just on whenever I see that all three things on my graphs are all in alignment, I'm going to hold on to it as what I would call a spec. Half of my business is actually, or the business that I do is buyless. The other half is speculation. Once you start kind of sending in stacks like I do, you can hold on to 10 sometimes just to see what happens, and that can turn out pretty well for you sometimes, and then you just got to set a stopgap. So it's a pretty 50-50 split. I would say that the buyless is just a really good predictor of the market, depending on how many buyless you're able to look at, especially if you can see them in conjunction. Also, just given the data that I'm able to see from where I work during the day, I have a better feel for the MTG singles market than most, so it gives me a general idea of how much stock to place into the information I'm seeing of where it's coming from. So it's a bit of a unique advantage, but You definitely can use the buy list for the immediate gains, and then anything that you feel particularly confident on, like I do, you hold on and you hope for the bigger margin, but you always have a smaller cutoff that you get out on.
Okay. So when you hold on to those specs and you're expecting to make more, do you then just send them to buy list later, or do you sell them like on TCG Player yourself or on Twitter or whatever?
So something that you can do that something that you can do is you can lock in your buy list when something's about to happen and wait a day and see how the market moves. And if everything goes to heck in a handbasket, say Oko gets banned, you've got your out. Like every time that I knew a ban restricted announcement was coming, I logged in my buy list 2 or 3 days before, because I know
that sounds. Is that shady though? Like,
yeah,
I'm not trying to accuse you or anything, but isn't that a little bit like?
That's what I said. But I mean, like, if this goes down to the risk avoidance tactics, because
right.
The last thing you want to be doing is holding a $90 card that all of a sudden is worth $40. Nobody wants that. So you got to kind of cover yourself sometimes.
And let me give a shout out here, since we're talking about this. I do want to give a shout out to coolstuffinc.com. They do not sponsor me. I do write for them, but they do not sponsor me. But one of the things that was really cool is when Oko got banned in Pioneer, I had recently bought from them 3 borderless Okos, so it's $157. They have a ban guarantee where if something gets banned, you can send those cards back and get a refund. And so I did that. Yeah, it's crazy. I sent the Okos back and they refunded me. Like, how insane is that? Now, I think it's like based on, you can get like store credit or whatever, but it's still like a full refund for a card that got banned or that got reprinted is really cool. And so maybe when you're looking at graphs and stuff like that, one of the cool things I like about Cool Stuff Inc. is if you build up your loyalty there, you can get up to 15% off the singles. And a lot of times that's like cheaper than TCG. And so like playing this game with the cheaper than TCG price of Cool Stuff and the backing of stuff getting banned is really neat,
Mm-hmm. No, that is actually really.
So anyways, just wanted to give that shout out. We can move on to the next question now.
No, that's excellent. That's definitely something people should know, to be honest, especially for an average player just picking up cards. That's really nice of them.
Yeah, and I think the actually loyalty program that they do, they don't really advertise it enough. The fact that you can get 15% off singles really puts you in a lower TCG bracket with them. So if you put the money in, make the investment, buying as much as you can from them over time, that's what I do. Is I always check there to see if there's something that like I can buy from them, price wise, without feeling like I'm, taking a bath. And a lot of times their prices are reasonable, and then over time you build up that credit, and it's really great.
Mm-hmm.
So here's another question from the audience, I guess we can call them. Traveling Merchant says, what are your thoughts about buying and investing foreign cards? For example, would you ever go into something like Japanese or Russian, or foil Japanese or foil Russian?
Oh my. All right. I'm just going to prefix this, and I'm going to try and do this in as courteous a light as I can. Anybody who... No, it's really not a bad thing. I'm just saying you have to be a very...
You said you're going to try to be as courteous,
Because there are folks who, they love their foreign cards. If you're an average Joe and you buy a foreign card, you better have very little expectation of selling that card outside of trading to somebody else who might enjoy it. If you are trying to sell it, you need to be an eBay seller, because eBay is global. If you are not on eBay, moving foreign cards is a nightmare. Just an absolute... unless it's like one of the premium editions, like the Japanese Planeswalkers that have special art, or Russian cards are just extremely, extremely limited supply, and they do have a very faithful but very niche following that buys almost entirely on eBay. I will say that the market for these cards has expanded lately, given particular MTG content creators' personal affection for them. But if you're just an average player, an average Joe, or even and just a regular seller who's not reached power level or even power, so I know TCG direct store owners who have trouble moving these. So just know what you're getting into when you buy them.
Yes, so I can back that up a bit. I'll give my own experience there. So when I sold out of Magic, I took a hiatus about 8 years ago or something, and I sold out of everything. And I loved Japanese foil stuff. So I had tons of Japanese foil for my personal, Japanese foil daisies, all the good Japanese foil stuff. Well, when I went to sell my collection, I could not find any vendor who would buy these Japanese foil cards. And I was like in the circle of vendors. Like I owned an online retail store, and I'm like asking for favors, like, come on, man, you can have the rest of the collection, but you got to buy these Japanese foils, They're like, hard pass, bro. Sorry, I can't help you.
Can't move them.
So
you can't move them.
After that experience, and that was like, like I said, 7 years ago. Nowadays, it's even worse. And I think the pushback that I have gotten when I've talked about, Japanese, Russian, and Japanese foil cards has been from James Chilcott. And I don't know what, Magic Finance content creator you were talking about, but James likes to buy the really obscure Russian foils, Japanese foils, and he's like, oh yeah, you just have to have an out. Well, he does have an out because he has a tribe, He has a tribe on Twitter. He has, a nice fat following on Twitter, and those people are interested in those cards. He has curated himself an audience for those cards. So for the normal person, the normal investor, they don't sell very well on TCG Player because there's no pictures. People are picky about the foils. They want really nice condition if you're selling them a Japanese foil. And on top of that, they're more common now because, before, U.S. sellers did not get Japanese boxes. You had to get the Japanese cards from Japan, And what they used to do is actually, Japanese sellers like Saito and stuff used to come over from overseas to GPs and just trade all their Japanese foils for near mint English cards, which they would take back to Japan and sell at really higher rates. And so that's how the foils got here. And then the other thing is that people would go, they would fly over there, pick up a bunch of Japanese foils, bring them back, and hustle them in the States. So that was a big deal. But now that the U.S. gets the boxes and the foil count has increased in the new sets coming from, Core Set 2020. So after Core Set 2020, foils are so much more available. You're just going to start seeing those cards get even worse. Already foils are getting worse. Like they're not much higher. They're starting to look like kind of like Modern Masters set foils and stuff like that, where the difference between a regular and a foil price is really slim.
I can slide in here with a story from just today. For the first time that I've ever seen today on the Card Kingdom buy list, the Brazen Borrower regular edition foil, they were offering 25% less than the non-foil regular version. I have never seen that before.
That's because the market is not there. The market is there for non-foils.
Well, they printed 4 or 5 other premium editions of a card. Before, you just had foil, and then you had promos as kind of an offshoot. But now you have showcase foils, you have extended art foils, you have regular foils, and
promo pack foils.
So now exactly. So now, like a Stone Coil Serpent is the first time printing. It's got like 8 editions. So people who previously they wanted the premium edition of a card, there's now 6 different premium versions. So the safety in getting foils. And I will say for James Chilcott, and he was who I was talking about. He's never hidden it. He doesn't have a TCG storefront, never has. He's an eBay power seller, so he knows his market, and he's doing rather well selling to them. So as long as that keeps working for him, God bless. I operate out of North America, so I got to stick to English.
I have no shade for James. I like to give him a jab from time to time, but hopefully he knows it's in good fun. All right, big heart for you, James, if you're listening. So let's move on to the next question here. Risk avoidance tactics. You talked about these. One of them is scumbagging people on your buy list by registering a couple days early. What other risk avoidance tactics do you have to share?
Small buy-ins. I mean, especially if you're new to finance, or even if you're unsure on a card, just buy a playset. You don't need to buy 30 or 40 editions of a card.
Low quantities is what you said.
Yeah, especially there's something that I'm not sure if everybody knows. I hope they do if they're doing MTG finance. Is that cards between $1 to $20 move rather briskly. They move well. Anything above that $20 mark moves very slowly. And this is kind of a pet peeve of mine when people say to trade their credit into power. You're locking away that money. Because it's very hard to then re-enter, to sell those power cards back into the market. Because they're so high value, the risk for the buyer and the seller, there's a lot of extra time, care, effort. Everything has to go into that.
Oh, but you don't. Let me just jump in there. You don't sell them; you trade them. That's the key. Because if you get a piece of power with your credit, and then you probably don't have the experience because you don't go to GPs. If you take that to a GP, and there's somebody who wants a piece of power, they will empty their binder for it. And you can essentially do like a deal where you're getting buy list rates for the piece of power that you're trading them, because people, like you said, it's too high of a price to pay. If they want like a Mox and it's $3,000 or $2,000, they would much rather invest their cards than money.
And that's fine if you're doing that for personal play or for personal use. Absolutely, get the cards you want and the cards you love. But in terms of a finance move, because I started off with a budget of zero, kind of in Magic, and so for me, getting my money in and out is essential to keep putting it back in, to keep reinvesting it. And if I lock it into, and this is why I had to create an entirely new script and system for what I call funny money, which is stored credit. Because the moment I lock away my money in stored credit, I will never take stored credit unless I already have a plan of what I'm going to do with it before I get it.
Okay. So you don't just store it.
Because if you lock that money away, you can wait for an opportunity to come up, and one will, but then your money is locked away and kind of at the mercy of that vendor to give you a good deal, which is what they want. That's why they do it, and it can work in your favor. But having money held up there, if you don't have a lot of capital, which I don't, I have a lot of student debt, I need that money back as fast as possible. So if you're trying to gain momentum in MTG markets, it's something I would recommend steering away from. But again, I don't go to GP, so I don't have that angle of the market.
Okay, so risk avoidance tactics: time your buy list orders. When you're doing it, make sure that you insulate yourself from risk, and then use low quantities. So buy lower amounts, right? Is there anything in the data that can help? Like when you tweet something, what's the risk level of that? If someone were to follow your advice on a general tweet, because what I'm assuming is that if people are still listening, they're going to say, well, how can I see these graphs and stuff? Well, one of the ways is through your Twitter account, right? And so if they're looking at that, what's the risk level like of them just going and saying, right now, I'm going to go buy some World Breakers,
So I didn't tweet out World Breaker. I talk about it because that's my call. Those are my risks.
Man, you know what? We just gave you guys a nugget. This is not public information.
No, because I don't want to send out on my tweet something that's as high risk. I am very confident I have a stack of 30 World Breakers on my desk right now. But I don't want to risk other people's money. So what I tweet out is what's already on the table, money to be had.
Arbitrage, right?
Yes, exactly. And something that I can't really compete with is that when somebody brags about having like 100% ROI or 40%, 60% ROI, what I'm sending out there is not going to be that sexy. It's just not. it's going to be a 20-30% gain max, but it's free money. If you just take, 2 minutes out of your day, click that buy list order, send it over, you've just made $10-15. You do that a couple times a day and you've just made dinner.
And the neat little thing you said is when you do that, if you drop ship, just simply put in the attention your buy list number, your order number. And that will show them where it's coming from. Interesting.
Experience. They just need cards because they had the Magic's actually doing quite well in terms of selling. They just need supply.
Right.
And the vendors that are selling, if they're selling at a certain price, I promise you, they've already listed that at a desired profit margin.
Yeah.
So, everyone wins.
All right. Well, is there anything else? I think we are getting close to the hour mark, so we can get ready to wrap it up. But if there's anything else that you want to share with the audience, you can do that now. Like, what other things do you want to share? And if there's nothing, we can just share how they can get a hold of you in this.
I'll just say, Magic's a game. I have fun with it on the side. I played it for quite some time. I still have a couple EDH decks. I still have a play group I play with. But it's a game to be had fun with. I know people aren't always fond of the MTG finance side, but again, the data is something I have fun with. Everybody's going to have fun. It's a wonderful game that exists, and everybody can have fun with it in different ways. Hopefully, everyone comes away happier for it. And, that's kind of just one of the many benefits of playing Magic. And, I hope everyone continues enjoying it. If you guys want to find me, you can find me at Wolf of Tin Street on Twitter. I post a couple of graphs every day of opportunities that they spring up. Yeah.
All right. Well, again, thanks for hanging out and sharing your data and your process, your MTG finance process with us. If you out there listening like this podcast and you want to hang out with us in Discord, the Discord link will be in the show notes. And if you want to support on Patreon, that discount link, that link will be also in the show notes. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.